I'm 𝗦𝗲𝗍𝗀𝗀𝘀. I'm a writer and broadcaster. I'd like to welcome CK Mishra and 𝗦𝗲𝗿𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘁. Mr. Mishra is an accomplished civil servant. After 37 years in the IAS, he retired 2 years ago. He's known widely for spearheading India's efforts at addressing climate change issues and at policy interventions in matters regarding pollution and air quality. He also led the Indian negotiations at important forums such as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and many other climate change forums. He's recognized for his significant contributions to improving the Indian public health landscape. We'll, of course, get to know much more about him soon. To talk to him, we have 𝗦𝗲𝗿𝗀𝘀𝘁. Tom is the founder and managing director of Two Ocean Strategy. He's a specialist in sustainability at the start of global supply chains. He's published in peer-reviewed journals and books on sustainability, natural resources, and energy. Tom is going to talk to CK Mishra in this interview coming up.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Sanjeev. It's a pleasure to meet you. And Mr. Mishra, what a treat we've got in store today with regards to being able to have the time to speak to you. So thank you so much for giving up the time. Mr. Mishra, I think I'm going to start by asking, it's been, if you can cast your mind back those many, many years ago when you were thinking about how to spend your life's work. What was it that struck you about the IAS that made you want to join? What were those motivation factors? Why did you decide to go into it? How did you find that journey of getting into the IAS?
That's a question which is very often asked. And I think at this stage, it becomes very difficult to focus and pinpoint on one thing. Because at that point of time, you were 21 years of age in 1983, and you saw everything in the IAS. You saw position, you saw responsibility, you saw glamour, you saw a top position, and that was the done thing in those days, to be very honest. So one tried and got into it. It was the, what should I say, satisfaction of competing with the best, the satisfaction of trying and get into the best civil service that you can think of, where you knew that later on you will be heading a lot of things, a lot of responsibilities of the country will be with you. So that is the entry point really. But as you go along in the service, there are many more things that start attracting you. And I think I'll spend a couple of minutes on talking about that. You know, the service actually shapes your life and conditions your thinking very differently. If you get into the service, the first thing that you notice that you are rooted to the ground and reality. So you are doing a lot of things which you had read about, which you knew about, but now you're face to face with reality, and that shapes your mind, that changes your decision-making abilities and changes perhaps your attitude as well. So it's a great curve to be in where you are learning all the time. And then, of course, the service offers you a huge amount of variety. I mean, one day you are handling agriculture, the other day education, the third day you're in health. And it's, for whatever reasons, the service is not about specialization. It's general administration. And that, I guess, is the strength of the IAS in India, that it looks for generalists. It looks for general behavior, because at the end of the day, it's man management. And that is, at a particularly younger age, you know, it gives you a great flexibility to operate. You're actually delivering to the people, delivering to the society, delivering not just to an individual or a group, but much larger platform. And this delivery gives you a sense of satisfaction. I know every job in this world, if done well, gives a sense of satisfaction. But I guess this is a satisfaction of a different level. of framing what the future is going to look like, of determining what your role in that future is going to be like, and shaping how people are going to behave in the future, or get what they want in the future. You have a responsibility to deliver, and you have to deliver. So this satisfaction is perhaps more in this service than anything else that I have come across. I mean, many people would talk about the power that the IAS carries with it. Yes, some are enamored by the power, but let me share the inside truth that this don't always remain with you. There are phases when you feel that you really don't have any power. You work in a different system of democracy. So what you are getting from the system is a sense of responsibility and a sense of fulfillment. Let me actually admit that whether you want to say it or not, this service does bring with itself some amount of social standing and prestige. And it's best admitted in humility so that you don't go over the top. There are people who would not like to admit this, but actually go over the top. So I would say, admit it, that there is this angle to it. That is what draws you to it. So when it is the standing that draws it to you yourself, then you have a special responsibility of maintaining the high standards. So I think because it is head and shoulders above a lot of other things, it is very important to get in. One thing that I've learned is it helps you learn to learn. Your learnings change completely, and it devises a new methodology of learning, which is continuous because you keep changing positions, you keep changing the work that you do. So you get trained for the IAS. There is a training module that you go through. But that doesn't make you a complete. You become a complete person only when you hit the ground. And this is one service which enables you to interact directly with the people and then sit in a position of policy. So the expectation is the learning you got from the first round will help you better in the second round. I think I've been able to kind of explain why and what attracted me to the IAS.
Well, Mr. Mishra, thank you very much for your honesty and eloquence there. I think that point you make around how you shape policy, but also how it shapes you. And I think that point that you make around how you view on learning and learning how to learn is something we're grappling with as a society and as a planet. So it's wonderful to hear you say such things today. I know you've had a long and very distinguished career, but if there were going to be maybe two key or three key highlights for you within that career, what would you say they were?
Again, a very difficult one to say what the three highlights were or the four highlights were. There are many highs and there are equal number of lows as well in a career of 38 years. But let me, highlight some of the things that were different from what we are expected to do in a routine nature. Everybody does his job in a routine way. I mean, that is contribution because that's the job you're brought in for. But if you can do different things, it means a lot. And let me just place it in two or three categories quickly. So the first category is that I have had the privilege of policy making right from the beginning in 1999, to be very honest, when I wrote the first handloom scheme for Government of India. Then I went on to write the industrial policy of Bihar of 2011, which was much acclaimed. Came back to the Government of India and had this privilege of writing the health policy of the nation in 2017, after 15 years of the earlier policy, which again, of course, there were big bats as well, saying that you've left this out, left that out. but by and large agreed to by everyone. And that's a highlight I would consider, because these policies then drive programs and what happens to people. Similarly, as Environment Secretary, 2 critical papers I was able to, guide and get into the public domain. For the first time in the globe, India wrote the National Cooling Action Plan. For the first time, we wrote the National Clean Air Program, which was alluded to while introducing me. So these are highlights. And then there are highlights on delivery. I'll just give you one example. One of the best feelings I had in life was when I was able to revive all the PHCs, the primary health centers in Bihar, which were closed for a long time. And as I always say, the 3 Ds did it: drugs, diagnostics, and doctors. We were able to manage that. And every PHC was working throughout the day thereafter. So these are things I would remember. Even, for example, today we're talking about the CoWIN, which is one of the best, digital platform for what is the COVID-19 vaccination. In 2016, we created even where we were able to track every single vaccine in this country. And that platform, even today, Gavi and other organizations recognize as the best platform in the world. So these were at the national level. I would also like to mention a couple of things at the international level. See, we all do negotiations, whether it was at WHO or UNFCCC or the Montreal Protocol. Those are routine negotiations you go through with your, fixed ideas many a times, and discuss and negotiate with countries, and perhaps close the top shop at the end of the day, and there's not much. But then 2 very fulfilling things happened in my life. One was being elected as the president of FCTC, that is the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. And that was a period I would never forget, because a lot of decisions globally were taken and that organization on how to do tobacco control in the world. The second was that for 4 to 5 years, I was co-chairing the PMNCH, that's a Partnership on Maternal and Child Health. It's an international organization. During my time, it was chaired by 𝗍𝗲𝗻𝘀𝘁. But you see, what that did was gave me an opportunity to present my views, and I would put it rather crudely, pushed my views globally on maternal and child health. These were some of the highlights. The new family planning strategy across the world. I still remember FP 2020 being a member with the Gates Foundation, working on it. We were able to frame a new family planning strategy for the world. So these are some of the things I consider really as highlights, where I would say I was able to act differently from what I would normally done to fulfill my normal obligations and duties.
Well, that's a wonderful way to put it. What are those over and above the routine? So that's, and also as someone married to a doctor as well, it's lovely to hear about some of those healthcare initiatives that have gone on to have such a big impact, not just within India, but globally, as we talk. Alongside the vast strides in public health that you were able to make, we also see a big push on climate change. This is one of the biggest issues of our time, and you have been at the heart of that discussion, not just within India, but globally. You have spearheaded India's climate change negotiations, and you have been instrumental in those policy interventions that relate to both pollution and air quality. What was it like being at the apex of these negotiations, where you have, I can imagine, a large amount of pressure, a large amount of competing interests? How did you feel at that point? And also, how do you feel now looking back at those negotiations?
Climate change, according to me, is one of the most complex things today. And if there is one sphere, and this is my view, where there is no one thinking globally, it is the climate change. Everybody's doing his own bit, but defining it in the way they want. We still have the great divide between the developed and the developing countries going on. But first and foremost, as the principal negotiator, one of my jobs was to convince the world that what the developing countries are trying to say in terms of climate justice or in terms of common but differentiated responsibilities for mitigation is a fact. It's a reality. And that is why the entire discussion was driven around where will the finance and technology come from to mitigate the emissions reduction, mitigate the GHG emissions and get reduction in emissions. I'm not getting into complex issues of what carbon trading would mean or what carbon reduction would mean or what net zero would mean. Simple things like reducing emission is a factor of technology and a factor of finance. If you ask me, Paris was a watershed. And the reason why I say so is that was the first time when every country committed. That was the first time we spoke about finance to the cause. And that was the first time when you had some goals set. But look at where we've been. We've been negotiating after Paris now for 7 years. But neither the finance has come, nor the technology has come, nor have we got to any better understanding. So my understanding is that your responsibility at the global stage is to put the country perspective first. But having said that, global strategies do not necessarily help country level actions. At the end of the day, the climate change initiative has to be country-led. So each country must have its own initiatives, one must have its own programs if climate change is to be. Take India, for example. What are the challenges? Global strategies are all there. You're looking at air quality issues, you're looking at GHG emission, and you're looking at carbon sink and forestry. Air quality issues is, we all know, construction, vehicular traffic, industrial pollution, and we had the National Clean Air Program coming in. If you look at the GHG reduction, industrial partnership happened, and it is in this context that I mentioned about the National Cooling Action Plan. The entire refrigeration industry came together to do it voluntarily because this is a necessity. So at the end of the day, climate change is going to force everybody to change. And I think it is in the benefit of the industry to change, because today and definitely tomorrow, greener objects are going to sell better and at a better price in the global market than those which are not so green. We will ultimately land up measuring carbon footprint on everything. So it's better that you, but the problem with GHG emission relates to the hard to abate segments. Cement, steel, mining. And for that, the globe must share technology, must share finances. Otherwise, that's not possible. Look at forestry, for example. The world talks about climate change. The world knows that green cover is a must, but it's dwindling everywhere. I wouldn't like to name countries, but some countries are absolutely destroying forests. India, fortunately, is one of the countries where the forest cover has been on the increase. That's because we changed our focus. We are now focusing on degraded forests. We are now focusing on out of forest trees. See, there is a limit with the population pressure that we have and the development imperatives that the country has. There's a limit to expansion of forests. So how do you get that carbon sink? So trees outside forests are a solution. Rejuvenating the degraded forest is a solution. And good agriculture practice is a solution. So climate change is not about just emission of GHG. Climate change is about lifestyle. And that is where I say that it is a constant struggle at the global level to convince the globe that it is not just mitigation, but also adaptation that is very, very critical, particularly for a country like India, where farm holdings are very small. I think adaptation is the way forward. You know, and at the end of the day, what are you going to do? There are certain things that are reality. And you cannot run away from that reality. And there is nothing at hand which helps you overcome it, mitigate it. So you get into adaptation. India was among the first countries to start a national adaptation fund. So you simplify implementations, simplify laws, encourage industries to switch to greener technology, and support them with some finance internally so that at least you reduce the emission. If the global finances come through, the reduction will be faster. If they don't come through, the reduction will be slightly slower, but it has to be a story of responsible growth. You can't stop a country from growing, particularly countries which have not had this opportunity in the past. So you simplify things. So that, in a nutshell, I think, is what climate change imperatives really call upon you to do.
Thank you. I think this conversation and your viewpoints are incredibly pertinent, considering the timeliness of this conversation in light of the new NDC commitments that are being made by India over the past week, but also the Inflation Reduction Act in America. It's also interesting to hear you talk about that premium for sustainability related factors that you will see coming through in a price within the Indian context. But also, just a follow-on question is, do you believe under the situation of technology and financial transfer, there can be a decoupling of economic growth from greenhouse gas emissions?
I would personally think immediate decoupling is not a possibility. But then, I don't think why we feel that only decoupling will help. Why can't we have growth with lesser emission? Why can't we have growth that is more responsible? It's a global phenomena. If there is more work in one part and less work in the other part, it doesn't mean that the less work part will be badly affected and the other one will be well. It's a global phenomena. So I think decoupling may not be the immediate answer, although that would be ideal. But I don't think we are in a position where we could say we can decouple economic activity with GHG emissions.
Mr. Mishra, I could ask you questions about this subject all day, but I know in the interest of time, I'm not going to, but I could, getting the opportunity to.
I would love to discuss it as well.
Well, we shall do this again, hopefully. So I think my last question in the interest of time really is around, do you think that the IAS as an offer and as a career path, do you still think it's as coveted today as a career as it was when you were considering the career that you were going to go into? And if there's been any shifts, why do you think that has been the case?
I don't know if my view is acceptable all around, but I personally feel that it is not as coveted as it was. Both the popularity and the respect seem to have slightly gone down. There could be various reasons. But one of the principal reasons we must understand is that in 1983, my options were hugely limited. For today's kid of 21 years, the options are huge and unlimited. So he gets to choose. The basket of choice has increased. And therefore, IAS is just one of them. As the economy grows, there'll be more opportunities and more people, brighter people will move on to other world as well. Then there is this whole issue of, the remuneration, the kind of life you live. Let me give you a blunt example. In government of India or in the state government, the minimum hours you put in is 10 to 11 hours every day. And if you expect any pat on the back for that, you will not get it because that's considered normal. If I was working in the private sector with that kind of time and with that kind of decision-making ability and authority, my lifestyle would have been completely different. But then there is no reason to complain because I chose it and chose it consciously. But today's well-read person chooses on the basis of various things. I mean, we chose a life where we would work for 60 years till we are 60. Today's youngsters want to get off at 40, 45. So they have a different path. There is also this whole idea of bureaucracy bashing, which is influencing a lot of minds. Some of it may be genuine, most of it unwanted, but that's a fact. You can't deny it and you can't just brush it aside. So that is also contributing to it. Then the governance itself is changing. The nature of governance is changing. When we came into the IAS, 80% of us were generalists. Today, 80% are technical people who've been trained differently. So the whole scenario has changed. The entire thing has shifted because of the economic developments. And today, I would certainly say that it is still a prestigious job to join the IAS, but not the only one. And there is certainly competition at the top.
Mr. Mishra, that is a very honest and useful understanding of the situation today. And thank you for taking through some of those changes as well. I'm going to ask just one more question. I know we agreed, I know we're running out of time, but I just wanted to wonder, because I'm so fascinated by having such a wealth of experience. Now, if TED, the TED Talks people came and asked you if you could give a talk, which I can imagine they probably have already, but if they came and asked you to give a talk for a period of time, what would you give your TED Talk on and why? I realize I put you on the spot slightly there, but I'm just really intrigued to know some of your experience, what you would want to talk about when you had that platform.
If you asked me to talk today, tomorrow, day after, I would talk about public health.
Okay.
That's been my passion. When I launched the mission 𝗦𝗲𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, everybody, including international organizations, trained their guns on me, saying, "What are you doing?" 1 year down the line, they were writing op-eds about it. Public health is the end-all and be-all of many things. We are looking at a society that is aging. We are looking in some countries at society which has a bulk of adolescents. So unless you are able to deliver on public health, it's very difficult to move on. And I, for one, believe very strongly that you must cure a sick person, but your resources must go towards ensuring that they don't become sick. And that is what I guess public health is all about. And India first was fighting with, as you know, maternal and child mortality issues. So I have this privilege of launching at least 14, 15 programs between 2015 and 17 to actually tackle this. And we're so happy that it has come down. But then you're hit by the non-communicable diseases, your diabetes, etc., whatever it is. So it's a constant struggle to keep a man healthy. So if you give me a choice, I'll talk about public health.
Okay, well, Mr. Mishra, thank you so much. It's great to hear how you're not only your career has not only focused on the health of the planet, but also the health of people as well. So I think with that, I just want to thank you very much.